Brian has just played c6. Let's see what my hold's response will be. In the meantime, we can actually be checking other games. Um, let's see how Nadal versus Yak is going. Uh-huh. Yeah, just played Queen E7, and you can see we're having options of knight going to F4. I would also like the knight going to C5. Is it doing really much? Yeah, I would actually prefer. Yeah, instead of playing knight all the way to um F4, I would also like to just maybe say play knight C5. If something like this happens, maybe black just tries to hang on to this pawn, then I'm having rook to D3, targeting this very sweet square. So knight C5 looks like a very good move. Let's see if black will play rook D5. I think rook D5. Do you take with the knight or do you take with the pawn? Do you take with the knight or do you take with the queen? I actually think taking with the pawn, with the queen marks check, not check, sorry, maybe say something like that, and then you just hang on to your pawn. And this is even better for white. So knight c4 really is the way forward. Let's see what black's response will be after knight c5 has been played. Uh, as we're waiting for that, you can also just check how Chumba Allen versus Peter Major is going. The game still drawn. Just notice the pawn, the a pawn keeps on being advanced. This pawn started all the way at a6, and the pawn is currently on a4. So you can actually see some pawn moves being made. But as I had said earlier, as long as this king is able to just be in front of the pawn, and the rook always cuts off the king, then white has nothing to worry about. Uh, Hugh versus Samuel Guy. I think Hugh had a pass pawn over here. I can see the pawn has been lost. Maybe we can just rewind and see how the pawn was captured. Rook c4 was finally played. Rook b1 was played. Bishop e4. Rook b2. a3. Rook. Sorry about that. Rook b3 was played. Pawn push. Knight takes. Rook takes. I think bishop takes in this position. Even before pushing the pawn, bishop takes looks like a clear way of winning, because you're forcing your opponent to capture, and capture. And remember, since we're a pawn up, we can actually manage such a rook end game. But let's see. I think maybe pushing the pawn, knight captures, bishop captures, not even rook captures. Actually, bishop captures. Rook came in between. Black still has the edge. A bishop versus a knight in an open position, I would actually prefer having a bishop due to its long range ability. But also the knight is pretty well positioned, though I feel like black's bishop is way superior compared to the knight in this position. You can see after after g5 was played, knight d5 has just been played. Black trying to look for a way to activate the king. Maybe say in the near future g6 f5 will be a viable move. But let's see. King g7 has been played. Let's see how Panchol versus Jacob. Panchol versus Jacob's game is still bring. The game's still drawn. Remember, White might not want to break. Sorry about that. White might not want to break this pawn chain because once the rook gets a way of checking the king, then this game is hard. But I can see Black's in check. You have to go back, give up the pawn check. This position looks very scary for Black, but the evaluation bar just says the game is drawn. Just looking at the position from a human's point of view, it feels like White might even just try and sneak a mate, or even just grab. You can see some pawns are up for grabs, but nothing much is really happening. Maybe say after rook check, king captures the other pawn, rook takes the other pawn. You take this pawn, just take this pawn, and it's more or less just simplifying the position. Nothing much is happening. The game is just still the drawn. You attack my pawn, just move back. You capture it. Yeah, nothing much is happening. Come. White's a pawn up, but still the game's dead drawn. Oh, instead of the king going all the way back to f8, Panchol just played king to e6, maybe trying to bring the king to support this pawn, because if Black has any fighting chances, then it has to be the ideas have to be based around this pawn being promoted. But let's see how Black does it. White isn't having the flexibility of moving this rook out of this file, because just Black is a simple pawn push away from promoting a single pawn push. A pawn push away. Which other interesting games would you guys like to see? Rook a6 check. The king just keeps on getting closer and closer and closer to the a2 pawn. King d5 has been played. Rook a5 check. And I don't know, I'm actually thinking of something that is maybe say the king just keeps on coming to this pawn, and White just ignores the king supporting this pawn and just maybe tries to capture all these pawns, and maybe even eventually just be forced to sacrifice the rook for the pawn. Three connected pawns versus a rook, and the king is still kind of far. I think maybe even white, if such a case occurs, then white might have winning chances. I'm not sure. We'll have to go back to the books, to the endgame theory, but that looks like a very promising position for white. Maybe white might try getting a draw, worst case scenario, but I'm sure three connected passed pawns versus a rook should be a win for white. And ladies, board one game is up. That was Madelta versus Julia. Madelta just won. I think this was the game, but we'll just rewind and see what happened. Before knight f6, bishop g4 was played, c4, e6, queen b3, b6, knight e5, bishop pawn takes, bishop check, bishop all the way back, knight f3 was played, c6 was played, bishop went all the way back to e2, bishop d6 attacking the knight, f4 supporting the knight and also bringing another piece into the center. That's a very good outpost for the knight. Queen c8 was played. I really don't like the queen c8 move. Let's see, what's the plan? Maybe just a simple castles, or even just try and look for a way to develop your knight. Maybe knight a6, knight c7 could have been a very good idea. Also, we have other ideas of looking for counterplay in the queen side by pushing f5, also viable. Queen c6, queen c played, bishop d2, a simple developing move. Short castles, rook c1, just now putting pressure on the c6 pawn. Bishop takes, pawn takes, knight to e4, knight captures the pawn on e4. You don't even have to maybe just weaken black's pawn structure by capturing on e4. Okay, that's a very good tactic from Adelta. Now winning a pawn. Queen d8, knight went all the way back. Knight just moved to f4. c5 was played. Is that giving another pawn? Bishop f3, knight takes, king takes, knight, pawn push, knight attacks the queen, putting more pressure. And yeah, now I feel like this pawn chain is going to give some kills. Once one of the rook manages to get here, maybe say a pawn push and then the other pawn push, having two passed pawns is really hard to stop. Yeah, the rook comes, king goes all the way back, knight to b7, e4 supporting the whole central pawn storm. Well, black doesn't have the liberty to take the e6 pawn because knight takes and that's a fork. g5 was played, knight went all the way to h3, f takes on e, knight takes, king went to e7. That's kind of strange. Maybe we might even want to either push the pawn or just exchange the pawn instead of giving out the pawn for free. Knight takes, rook e5, very solid. Knight d8 was played. Knight went back to d4. Actually, Madelta is just utilizing the tactical weaknesses that the opponent is having, that Julia is having. So she has options of even hiding the knight because, well, pawn can't take the knight. Sorry, this rook is in trouble. The knight isn't doing that much. Then it's just actually disconnecting the rook. So It's not the best knight compared to this knight. But either, what can we say? Whenever you're having such moves, you can just move them. Bishop goes all the way back to a6. Another pawn push. King goes all the way to d7. Knight now plans of what's the knight going to do there? Oh, knight is coming to e7 looking for a fork. Alternatively, you also have another pawn push, so we can't make the pawn push right now because of the knight being there. So the rook went to g5. g4 was played. Knight e6. h4. Rook all the way back. We finally get the fork. Knight f4. Takes the knight on c. Rook takes. Sorry, take the rooks on c. Oh, you can't push the pawn. Yeah, you can't push the pawn. Rook. Bishop check. King all the way back. King d2. Knight d5 was played. Should we be scared? The rook comes here. Nothing much is happening, so you can just continue. Yeah, and finally his pawn, the pawn just overwhelmed the king. And regardless, I'm just promoting. Regardless, Madelta was going to promote. So good game from Madelta and Julia. Let's see. So far, in the top 6 boards, no open game is finished. We're just waiting to see how the games are doing. But right now you can see the bars are just fluctuating. When we started, the bars were kind of as I was saying, when we started the bars, just the game, all the games were just kind of drawn. But now we're seeing some other games are still drawn. Some other games are taking some sharp um, evaluations. Let's see what's happening here. Here with 7 minutes on the clock, and Samuel with 33 minutes on the clock. His position is still drawn, though you have to actually have accurate play for you to even just claim a win in this position. And now the pawns actually just kind of locking each other. Well, um, light squared pawns versus a light squared bishop. If the bishop manages to just target the base of this pawn chain, then white is going to be in trouble. Madol clearly winning. To Peter Chamba Allen versus Peter Major, the game's just still drawn. Hugh's game also, Hugh has an edge, but as I had said, it's too soon to tell. And DT versus Panchol, the game's also drawn. Brian Traboso. And now Methu is they've gone for an imbalance where black is having a rook for a knight, that is, and sorry about that. Queen d3 was played, and b takes on c, and now let's see if Methu will go for queen takes on c3 check or knight takes on c3. Interesting game. That's between Irungu versus Mehul. Irungu went for a very sharp imbalance, but so far so good. He's still having the edge. Now Mehul's rook is just kind of inactive, trying to stop the c pawn, and Mehul's in check. Let's see what he plays. And I think When the king moves, then I'm having rook h7 check, exchanging the rook. Maybe say if the king comes here, also having just a simple check. The king has to keep on coming. That, and this is coming. I'm wondering why I give out a rook check. Yeah, this might just be like now completely lost. Just come here. Oh, oh, black is just trying to look for a way to get a draw. But let's see how the game goes. King went to e7, and bishop b4 check was played. King f6, bishop went to d6, rook captures on c6 has just been played. Let's see if knight d7 will be played. Two options: knight d7, or alternatively bishop goes to e5. Let's see if knight d7 is played. King goes there, and then we just play that. King has to. The king can't go here because of this, losing the queen. The king has to come back here, but how am I benefiting from this as white? Check. The king goes there. Check or check. I check here, the king comes here. I check here, the king still comes here. What am I doing? Am I looking for? Oh, nice. Yeah. Actually, the position, black's position is just crumbling. Let's see what black does. With 12 minutes on the clock. Well, board one, the game has just ended surprisingly. Not surprisingly, actually. Wait, what just happened? I'm seeing Yak who won the game. Yeah, board one, Yak against Mado. Yak has just won. So board one, the game's up. Let's see how board two and the rest of the other boards are faring on. So far, both board one in the ladies and board one in the open, the games are complete. Sorry about that. We can just have a wide view of how the other games are faring on. Board one, board one's complete. Board two, the position is still dead drawn. Board three, Hugh still having the advantage. Also, Onditi just containing the strong Pansol in the draw. You can even see the way rating difference is actually quite huge. Pansol at 2034, um, standing strong in the top 10. On DG at 1879, so he might actually be getting some good elos from this draw. And see also fighting for survival against Methu. Brian Irungo just played knight d7 check. Let's see how Gohil will respond to that. King g7 has been played. Bishop e5 should be played any moment from now. Maybe just having a quick look at the overall results. After some of the round one games are done, I can see Amoichom has just won his game. Zeki Mugo also on the game. Shout out to Zeki Mugo. Kina Simiu Jadon. Shout out to Simiu. Chalopicha, Mwega Nkanda also won. Kipchumba Brian, Joel Okindo, Wayne Joe, Omunyi Robinson, and we also have some draws like Kelvin Gigi, Patrick Jeremy. We also have Emmanuel Kibat and Kimani Ndarwa. Some games still ongoing. Let's see. Bishop E5 check has been played. Now Brian is clearly winning. Let's see how he just tries and converts this position into a one position after the first King F7 has been played. King F7, Rook H7 should follow. Brian taking his time. As you're waiting for Brian to play, we can just try and look at how now he is just completely winning. What about Chumbala? Is the game still drawn? Yeah, the game's still drawn. Now the pawn has gotten to the second rank, but the problem is the king can never get to the third rank in support of to support the pawn on a2. Now Chumba is just making repetitive moves. Go to um yeah, this game is just dead drawn. Panchal versus Onditi, also still drawn. Toboso versus sorry about that. Toboso versus Medu, also still Medu still having the upper hand. Queen C2 has just been played. For the new viewers, if you're new to this channel, welcome to the Chess Kenya YouTube channel, where rather all the games are going to be streamed. That is all events, including the Grand Prix events that are taking place, or any event that's going to be covered by Chess Kenya. You guys will always be getting the updates here. You'll always be able to watch the games live. So kindly just give us a thumbs up, subscribe, turn on your notifications so that you can always be notified whenever we post. And yeah, thank you so much for staying tuned. Oh, Brian Erungu missed Rook H7, which was completely winning, and instead went for Knight C5. Um, Not that bad, but just gives away all the advantage we had. Can you imagine if Rook H7 was played, then this is just it is completely winning. But um, Erungu Brian just played Knight C5, and the king at least has some space to breathe, has some room to breathe. You can see now the game's kinda almost becoming a draw. Jacob versus Panchol down to White having an extra pawn, a pawn that's never going to be promoted. Sorry, White's having an extra pawn, not even an extra pawn. It's actually a rook for a pawn on the seventh rank. The rook really can't stop the pawn because the pawn's just move away from being promoted. Um, what Black can hope to is just maybe try get the king as close to the pawn, which is practically impossible. Or king f6 has been played. Now it'll just be back and forth checking moves that the king goes to um, e7. The rook comes back check. The king goes to f6. The rook comes back check. The king goes to this. Square g7. That is the rook just comes check, and the game's always going to be a draw. I think a draw through by repetition. So we can safely conclude that Panchol versus Onditi's game will just end up being a draw. Let's see if other games complete. So far, Bodwan, as I'd said, Yak won against Madol. Bod 7, that is Mayeng, then Ado versus Sagwa Hillary. Mayeng just won. Bod 10, Philip lost. Singe Philip lost to Simujadon. Martin Jorogi also lost to John. Andy Moses lost to Bora Felix. James M. Manikor also lost to Kipchumba Brian. And then as I said, we had some couple draws. That's Numad Shabir versus Ombiro Clifford. Kibon Emmanuel Kibet versus Kamau Kelvin Gigi, Joel Okindo beat Opio Vitalis. Jason Kimani drew against Patrick Remy. Cheriot Eli won against Carlson Maragia. Daniel Misico lost against Kelo Peter. Wayne Joe Jarumi beat Gisheru John Wagema. And Mwega also won Moses. Omoni Robinson beat Sadiq, and we can also see and Goa Jackson Kamau hasn't played. Walela Othen also wasn't paired. Zeki Mugo got a bye. So a couple more games still brewing, as we had said. I think Onditi versus Exclusive, Onditi versus Panchol will mostly end up in a draw. Chumba versus Peter might also end up in a draw. So I'm assuming two more draws in this lot, and we are having so far how many people with maximum points? I think so far around 14 people have maximum points. So that's what's up. We'll just back to the game. After King f6 was played, Rook f1 check was played, and then the king just went back to e7, waiting to see the draw. And the draw, Chumba versus P. Let's see if Onditi versus Panchol went for the bishop sacrifice to get up, thinking he was going to get some passes, but unfortunately the game now is at the draw. I think The two first pawns looked very strong, but the knight might have some time to come and at least support the king in getting one of these pawns. So that game might actually have slipped from Hugh. Just waiting for the final score. Brian Monkey, Rongo still having a slight edge, though the game might actually end up in a draw, but we'll see. Rook H7 check has just been played. Um, uh, King D8 with a move. Now the queen's just bystander, nothing much happening. Panchol versus Ontiti Jacob, also drawn. Now we are having three games that are still going on, of which in these three games, two of them are kind of drawn. I think it's only Metho versus Brian Toboso, which looks like Metho is clearly winning. But Toboso is putting up a fight. 2 minutes on the clock. Metho has 14 minutes on the clock. And Lerunko versus Meho, we have 3 minutes on the clock versus 14 minutes on the clock. What about Hughes game versus Samogai? 24 minutes on the clock versus 3 minutes on the clock. Let's see how Ngong plays. If Ngong plays any other move outside apart from knight c1, is the game really finished? No, the game's actually pretty much still drawn. I think this king can just stop the two pawns. Maybe say if the knight goes, then the pawn is pushed. King comes there. If you try something like this, you can always have some jack. I come here. I always put some annoying king moves. So that's why the game's just dead, drawn at the moment. King d8 has just been played. The games are still tough. You can see Irungu pushing for the win. After king d8 has been played, let's see if rook d7 will be played. Knight b7 check has been played instead of rook d7. Really looked forward to Brian playing d7, rook d7 check that is. But what does knight b7 really do? So the king comes here. If the king goes there, nothing much is happening, just coming back. Obviously, you don't want this rook to get here because they might actually even just be checkmating yourself, so the knight has to come back. Well, not a lot of. Yeah, actually, I don't think knight b7 really gives you a lot of activity as white, considering you don't want black to even have some counterplay. You know, maybe even if the rook just manages to get here, then you might even end up getting checkmated. We can just have a look at Matthew's game. Queen b7 has just been played. Having the rook and queen battery targeting the b2 square, checkmating white. But white, I think white has a lot of in between moves. We have maybe say rook c1 check. The king has to go the back check, or even checking here. If Mate opts for an exchange, is he going to be winning? Well, he still is winning, but let me see. Rook check. This is the only move. Uh, we have this check. Wait, what? Actually, black is losing a queen. After check, the king has to come there and then check. King takes, queen takes, goes there. Can even just check. Oops, sorry, not that check. Just annoy with that check. Okay, rook comes here, just takes, simplifying the position, just easily going on to win the game. So that's also an option that Metho is having. Um, what does that do? Check. The king comes, check. King comes, um, check. The king has to come, check. And I think we are having a series of submitting patterns. And the king is going to be cornered in a few. Check. The king comes, the queen comes, king goes, rook comes, queen goes, and finally we get our checkmate. So if Metho won't be winning material, that is through rook c1 check, king goes there, rook c6 check, queen has to capture, queen captures, and easily wins. He also has the option of just checking and luring the king all the way to the king side, just getting a very good mating net. Let's see what Methu will play. Still wait. And Toboso has finally resigned. Now Methu has won. How many games are still going on? While Rongo also won, Mehul resigned. Now we are only down to one game. That's Samuel against Hugh. And the game's a tricky game. You can say Hugh is having some three very scary pawns. Though with accurate play, the game still drawn. But I think if Samuel just makes an inaccuracy, then that's more than enough to ensure. That's more than enough to give Hugh the win. Let's see how the pawn got captured. Bishop takes, pawn takes, push the pawn. The knight wants to c3 check, king f4, knight d5 check, king takes g4, knight f6 check, and the king goes to e5, chasing away the knight. If the knight moves, then automatically the other move should be, maybe say if the knight goes there, then just push. The knight goes there, you can either do that, or I'm thinking of pushing the pawn, not giving us any edge. Maybe even try push this other pawn. The king comes there. Yeah, this is just kind. I don't know, just have to look for a way to reroute our push. It comes, push. Knight just comes here. And yeah, this is just dead. This is just dead drawn. And the pawn push has been made. Knight e3 check. King f4. More of a repetitive pattern, I guess. Knight back to d5 check. King e4. And yeah, actually, this is why even just having the three pawns still doesn't guarantee a win, because the knight keeps on jumping from place to place and it's really giving the king some nightmares. You can't make any pawn advances as long as the knight just keeps on checking the king. And if the knight just manages to maybe even snatch that g4 pawn, then it's really hard to make progress because the two isolated pawns will be very weak um, compared to having the knight um, and the king. Still waiting to see if knight f5 will be played. Knight f6, sorry. Still thinking. Let's see if knight f6 check will be played. Well, I can actually see two games are still ongoing. That is in the open section between that Samuel versus Hugh, the game that we're just viewing, and also Suleiman Omondi is also playing against Jason Roy. Those are the two ongoing games currently. Unfortunately, we are not able to stream Omondi's versus Neroy's game. Um, but I can pretty much tell you, I know it's a very interesting game and also very hard because both of them are really solid players. But hoping to see the results soon. Anyways, back to our game. Going with going with 1 minute on the clock. Here with 4 minutes on the clock. And the last move to be played was King E4. Still trying to figure out if Knight F6 will be played or they'll go for another variation. Maybe say Knight C3. But regardless, most of them just lead to the game ending in a draw. I think maybe I might be the one who's not having the live feed because it's just telling me Samuel's clock just ran out. I'm assuming maybe I'm not having the live feed, but most likely my prediction is the game either ended in a draw or maybe even Hugh managed to be able to sneak upon to promotion, but mostly a draw. But regardless, we'll just get to know the score at the end. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I would like to give a special thanks to Isaac, who was our technical support today. Also, Deno for making this a success, not forgetting Just Kenya for giving us this chance, and you as the viewers for tuning in and also staying tuned to watching the live action that was just taking place in Nakuru. Again, I am Isaiah Otieno. Thank you guys so much for watching. Kindly share, tell a friend about our YouTube channel. Also, we are having a YouTube channel together with Coach Gideon Jihinga called Chess254 TV. You guys can also go there, subscribe, turn on your notifications so that you can always be notified whenever we post new content. Also, don't forget to like this video so that we'll be motivated to even put out more content for you guys to be able to enjoy. Either ways, I was again your host, Isaiah Otieno. Thank you guys so much for staying tuned. Till next time. Bye bye.